We're going to talk about a paradox, right? I named it actually the paradox of greatness, serving as Christ served, right? And then we're going to be in Matthew chapter 20, verses 17, chapter 20, verses 17 through 28. And we're going to start by reading, but now, this is going to be the third time Jesus has predicted his death and resurrection. So one of the things I want you to look at right here, I also want you to remember these verses, these places. Go ahead and mark your Bible. It's going to be in Mark chapter 10, verse 32 through 34, and actually Luke chapter 18, verses 31 through 34. And those are going to be the parallels. I like to look at the parallels in the gospel. So we'll be also looking at some of those. But now let us read his word, what it says. And, right here, starting with 17, it says, "Now Jesus, going up to Jerusalem, took the 12 disciples aside on the road and said to them, 'Behold, we are going to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be betrayed to the chief priests and to the scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him to the Gentiles, to mock and to scourge and to crucify. And the third day he will rise. The third day he will rise again.'" So, as you see, that one verse is there, and it's talking about his death. It's going to be his death and resurrection again. He's predicting it. When we go to Mark, to get a little bit more information, Mark chapter 10, verse 32, it actually says, "Now they were on the road going up to Jerusalem, and Jesus was going before him," and it says, "They were amazed, and as they followed, they were afraid." Then it says he took the 12 aside and began to tell them the things that would happen to him. So as I got to thinking, why were they afraid? What was one of the reasons that they would have been afraid? If you actually think about it, why would they have been afraid? When you look at the what they were believing, what they will find more out throughout this section and into the next we're going to find. But maybe they had an awareness of the danger, right? The disciples might have been aware of the increasing hostility, which they weren't might have. They actually were. They were aware of what the Sadducees and the Pharisees and how they had been doing. And they also knew that perhaps them going to Jerusalem, that would have led into more, would escalate it even much, because the religious authorities of Israel were actually there. And that was maybe a reason why they were afraid. Another one would have been a sense of foreboding, right? Jesus had already told him several times of his impending death and suffering, right? You remember the part where he sat there and he said that, and Peter says, "Be it not, Lord, this isn't going to happen to you." And he had to rebuke him, For he wasn't looking at the things of man, but Peter wasn't, but he needs to be looking at the things of God. That might have created a sense of maybe they were thinking back about what was ahead, They also probably had a fear of unknown. The disciples may have been uncertain. I'm sure they were uncertain about what was fixing to take place in Jerusalem. And they might have actually feared, especially being that Jesus now is, bringing them to the side and telling them, what was about to happen, And so, in a way that would have been very terrifying, One of the other things I believe is their understanding of spiritual implications, right? I don't believe they quite understood what was going on here and when Jesus would say these things to him. While the disciples, they didn't fully comprehend the significance of Jesus' journey to Jerusalem. And they likely seemed like, there was something big going to happen. And so I would actually say even more that they probably felt like soldiers going into a battle, and that fear that you would have. as a soldier goes into battle, he's worried about what he's going to face. Here it is, he's going to Jerusalem, and the Jewish people, especially them, they were expecting this Messiah to be the King of Israel right there and then, right? They expected this Messiah. Every time Jesus tried to tell them about the suffering side that he had to do, they were all ready to, take over and sit on the throne. And we'll see this in this part right here a little bit more. And Jesus, then he says, behold, we are going to go up to Jerusalem in the Son. And I want to say this, there's a couple of verses here where he's saying this. He's saying it, when he says this, let me read it to this, the way that I look at it in my eyes, what he's saying. He's saying, listen up, guys. We're going to Jerusalem. And the Son of Man, me, I'm going to be betrayed to the chief priest and to the scribes. And they'll condemn me to death. And deliver him. They'll deliver me to the Romans, to the Roman authorities. Right? And they're going to mock me and make fun of me. And then they're going to put me on a cross and they're going to kill me and they're going to crucify me. But don't worry, because on the third day, I'm going to rise again. That's what Jesus is basically saying in this verse. He says, behold, we are going to Jerusalem. And that behold is like, listen up. He's trying to get them to understand, to listen up. And what he's trying to tell them, a little bit more details in this too. Luke actually says that when he said, behold, he says, that he would be betrayed, right? I mean, right here, not Luke, but Matthew says he'll be betrayed. And that they'll crucify him. Those are two things that they get. But Luke also says that they're going to go up and that they're going to... all the things that were written about him in the Old Testament, in the prophets, right? Concerning the Son of Man, he says that will be accomplished. This actually says, then he took the 12 aside and said to them, behold, we are going to Jerusalem, and all things that are written by the prophets concerning the Son of Man will be accomplished. That's what it says. So I got to thinking, okay, so let's look in these 18 and 19. Let's see, and then look at Luke, and let's see what that breaks down, what that says. Luke emphasizes that part that the prophets, the things that were written by prophets concerning him, and it highlights them. So I went and looked for a couple. Isaiah chapter 53. If y'all want to turn, go ahead and turn to Isaiah chapter 53. All right. And that way you can get a knowledge of what it says. Isaiah chapter 53. We're going to go through verse 3 and verse 5 and verse 7 and verse 9. But right here in Isaiah 53, it says, he is despised and rejected by men. Right? He told his disciples, these things that are concerning me that are written, these are the things. Now they should have known this. Right? They're right there with Jesus. And I'm sure that they didn't just go around just having a good time. They probably studied the scriptures also, They didn't just go around healing, but he probably told them the scriptures. So he would have sat there and he would have probably read these verses to them. He says, he was despised and rejected. A man of sorrows. That's why I picked that song, Man of Sorrows, right? It was acquainted with grief. And we hid it as it were our faces from him. And he was despised, and we did not esteem him. That reflects that sorrow that he had going up there. He that sorrow of that, being despised, not only through his crucifixion here, but he was also despised through his whole ministry. Many times he was rejected. Isaiah 53:5 sits there and it says, but he was wounded for our transgression and he was bruised for our iniquities, right? The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and by his stripes we were healed. These right here tells us that the Messiah is suffering for our sake, right? He's suffering, which was a fulfillment. That was by the wounds that were done to him. That was by him being put on that cross, right? Those were specific. You know, another thing Isaiah says, verse 7, it says he was oppressed and afflicted. Yet he opened not his mouth. He was a lamb led to the slaughter, as a sheep before its shears, silent. So he opened not his mouth. You know, that prophecy right there, shows that he was submissive to it. So much so that when you look in Matthew chapter 27, later on in verse 12, it says, but when he was accused by the chief priest and the elders, he answered nothing. Then Pilate said to him, do you not hear how many things they testify against you? But he answered not a word, so that the governor marveled greatly. He was led up there. He didn't say a word. See, this is specific to what happened to our Lord. And it was specific. He's telling our disciples, these disciples here that these were the things that were prophesied. These things that were prophesied. He's going to fulfill them. He also said in verse 9 of Isaiah 53, it says, and they made his grave with the wicked, but the rich at his death, because he had done no violence, nor was there any deceit in his mouth. Now, this right here foreshadows that he would be died. He would go up there and die on that crucifixion with the wicked. He was with two other people, right? That they were thieves on the cross. But one of the things that was fulfilled was he not buried in a rich man's tomb. They would have seen that. They would have seen those things, and these would have been things that would have been fulfilled, right? When we look at Psalms 22, if you want to go there, Psalms 22, I'm going to give you 4 more things that it says. Psalms 22, it says, my God, why have you forsaken me? Jesus extensively said that right on the cross. That's because when you look at it, God had to turn away from him because his sin was put on, the sins of us were put on him. Not his sins. He had no sin. But our sins were put on him. And as he uttered that word, he knew that's probably the worst thing ever that Jesus ever went through, is that his Father would turn away from him. That's what hell in eternity and living in outer darkness, that's part of it. You never have nothing else left of God. God's no longer there with you. Psalms 22, 6 and 8. It says, but I am a worm and no man, a reproach of men, despised by people. All who see me ridicule me. They shoot out their lips and they shake their heads, saying, he trusted in the Lord. Let him rescue him. Let him deliver him, since he delights in him. Do you remember Matthew 27:43? It says, he trusted in God. Let him deliver him now, if he will have him, for he said, I am the Son of God. That's the prophecies that were being fulfilled. These were things from the Old Testament that he shared with his disciples. It describes that ridicule that was why they taunted him right while he was up on the cross. It describes it. Psalms 22:16 says, for dogs have surrounded me. The congregation of the wicked have enclosed me. They pierced my hands and my feet. Do you realize that at this time, crucifixion wasn't even a thing? The Romans made crucifixion something. But right here, 1,000 years beforehand, it's talked about showing the crucifixion right there. That his hands and his feet, that he'd be up there on the cross. It directly shows what was going to happen. And so when they would have heard him say, I'm going to be crucified, they should have went right back to that verse and said, this is what is going to happen. These things in the Old Testament that sit there and prophesize about me, these things are what should be up there. And also, the last one I'm going to share with you on this is 22:18. It says, they divided my garments among them, and For my clothes they cast lots. Do you remember the Roman soldiers who cast their lots for his clothing? You know, it just shows. That's actually in Matthew 27:35, Mark 15:24, and Luke 23:34. So they cast lots for his clothing. You know, and so as we see this part of him going to Jerusalem, as we see what he says, you know, that he will be betrayed to the chief priests, to the scribes, to them, and they'll condemn him to death. You see, Jesus, Jesus' death was as he was going, awaiting him in that city of Jerusalem. So yeah, the disciples would have been fearful if, in that sense. But on this occasion, he also tells them, like I said earlier, he also tells them that he would be betrayed. It actually says that the Son of Man will be betrayed to the chief priest. Not that he'd be betrayed by the chief priest, but to them. That means somebody close to them would be a betrayer. And we know in foreshadow that Judas was the betrayer, right? And another thing he actually said that he didn't say, he said that the way he was going to be put to death was by crucifixion. It says, and the Gentiles will mock and scourge me and crucify me. It shows, though, the prophetic nature as he's walking to Jerusalem of his mission. We've been discussing this ever since he said he's going to turn to Jerusalem. So, and it shows his redemption. What he's wanting to do is to redeem us. He also, like I said, he also reminds them that the death, though, was not the end of him. Because he sits there and he says, and the third day he'll rise again. Right? So it's not going to be the death of him. That's not the end of him. Luke chapter 18, verse 34, though, says, but they understood. Now, this is the part where I was telling you, this is the other. It says, but they understood none of these things, and this saying was hidden for them because they did not know these things which were spoken. Isn't that crazy? Here he has been with them all this time, and yet they don't understand it. Now, I believe a part of that is because they didn't believe that part of what it is. And I want you to examine yourselves as you go today. I want you to pick this Bible up and I want you to look at this and I want you to say, what part of this Bible do you not believe? What part of this do you not trust? I trust the dates. I trust the times. I trust everything that's in this word, right? I don't sit there and say, well, I accept this part, but I don't really trust that miracle that he healed that person. Or I trust this part, but I don't really trust this part over here. Maybe I just don't want to trust this part, And so one of the things that I kind of think is that when we see that these things were hidden from these disciples, and I say our disciples, I don't know why I say that, but there are disciples. There are disciples too. We love them. And when I say that, they're our family. We're going to get to one of these days, get to meet them. And I pray that I treat them right in how I speak about them because I love them. And I want their word to share with all of us, to go out and go to the world so that we can learn from them. I would much rather learn from somebody else's mistake and never have it than to have to learn from my own mistakes. It's a lot easier to learn from theirs. But Corinthians chapter 4 verses 3 and 4 says, but if our gospel is veiled, listen to what this says. If our gospel is veiled, it is veiled to those who are perishing. Those minds of the God of this age has blinded. So who is that? That's Satan. The God of this age is Satan. And he's blinded those. And this is the key thing. Who do not believe, right? Lest the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is in the image of God, should shine on them. So just as a person doesn't believe in Christ and they don't believe in salvation or Jesus or whatever, and they can't understand it, it's foolishness to them, like it says in the cross right there. I believe that we as Christians can sit there and neglect to understand some of His word, and we'll lose those blessings for what we don't understand. Do you get what I'm saying? So as the disciples are traveling and they didn't understand those things, it's probably because they didn't think really that it was going to be that bad. They didn't really look at His suffering and His pain, and they didn't understand what He was foretold it was going to happen. They were thinking, yeah, but it's not going to be a big deal. We're going to go up there. And we're going to be, and this is going to be Jerusalem. It's going to be wonderful, and you're going to be the king, and you're going to sit on this throne and everything like that, and it's going to be wonderful. And that's what I believe they were mentioning and they were believing at that time. And I think the very next thing would tell us that. You know, Matthew, if you'll go ahead and read, let me give you another idea before I go, because I put this down. It says in Matthew chapter 13, verses 10 through 15, and it's talking about believing and stuff. And learning. He says, and His disciples came to Him and said to Him, why do you speak to them in parables? He asked them that. Why do you speak to them in parables? This disciple said. And He answered and said to them, because it has been given to you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. For whoever has, to more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. Therefore I speak to them in parables, because, listen, here's the key thing. Because seeing they do not see, nor hearing do they not hear, nor do they understand. You see, they don't understand those things because even though they see it, they don't see it. Even though they hear it, they don't really hear it. And so they don't understand it. And in them, Jesus says, the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled, which says, hearing you will hear and shall not understand, and seeing you will see and not perceive. For the hearts, listen right here, it's a key verse, for the hearts of this people have grown dull, and the ears are hard of hearing, and their eyes they have closed. It says they have closed. Lest they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears, lest they shall understand with their hearts and turn. Right? So that I should heal them. That's what Jesus is sitting there saying. He's saying, listen, if they just believe, I'll change it all. I'll let you see. But if you're not going to believe, you're going to have a hard time understanding these things. And I think as us as Christians, we have to believe God's word. As that child, as his father is telling him how to do things and grow up in the world, right? We're to believe just as our Father has told us through His word what it says. It's very important that we do that. And if we don't, then we're going to be hard of understanding those things. Just like if he don't, you tell him, hey, don't touch that eye. You know what's going to happen to him if he don't believe his daddy? He's going to touch that eye and it's going to burn him. And then he's going to know. But it's going to be no. And Jesus is trying to tell him, listen, this is what's going to happen. I'm not alone in that thought. John Wolvard, what he said is the disciples understood none of these things, and this saying was hid from them. Neither they knew the things which were spoken. Putting all these passages together, it seems the disciples had a foreboding that the trip to Jerusalem was dangerous. So you see, they were fearful. But they could not bring themselves to believe literally what Jesus was saying. They figured it was maybe some kind of spiritual death or maybe something. They couldn't really believe. Now, when we look at this unbelief that the disciples had, that Jesus, the unbelief of the disciples, that Jesus was going to die, brought this next event that we're fixing to go to, it brought it to pass. It's what showed it, because they didn't believe it. They didn't believe exactly. So that's where we get into, it talks about James and John and their mother coming and asking Jesus. And let me read it. It's Matthew 20 through 28. I'm going to read this. And it says, right here, it says, "Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to her with her sons, kneeling down and asking something from him. And he said to her, 'What do you wish?' And she said to him, 'Grant that these two sons of mine sit on your right and on your left hand in your kingdom.' But Jesus answered and said, 'You do not know what you ask. Are you able to drink the cup that I am about to drink, and to be baptized with the baptism I am to be baptized with?' And they said, 'We are able.' So he said to them, 'You indeed will drink my cup and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with. But to sit on my right hand and on my left hand is not mine to give, but it is for those whom the Father, whom it is prepared by my Father.' And when the 10 heard it, they were greatly displeased with the two brothers. But Jesus called them to himself and said, 'You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who are great exercise authority over them. Yet it shall not be so among you. But whoever desires to become great among you, let him become your servant. And whoever desires to be first among you, let him be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and give his life a ransom for many.'" So you see, when we look right here at this part right where she goes and kneeling down, right? She's kneeling down to Jesus, and she says, and she's with her sons. Her sons are both there. Probably, I believe, I may have wrote this later on, but they probably put her up to it, right? Saying, well, Jesus will listen to you, Maybe he won't listen to us because, but they go in there and they go and she says, as she's kneeling down, she says, "Grant these two sons." And, that's a sort of an admirable thing. You want your sons to aspire. I want the best for my son. I'm sure y'all want the best for your son, right? Who wouldn't want that? Who wouldn't want it to actually be in a place like Prestige, right next to Jesus? But, he says, let them sit on the right and the left. How many times in our Christian growth, right, have many of us come to worship God in this way, like she did, with the same motives? How many times have you went to go and worship God with those same motives? Lord, please, whatever it is, let me have whatever, move me up to prominence in a way. But you come to Jesus and you're praying, you're asking for those things. That's a sense of worship. Here, what we're finding though is that there was a desire for power and a position emerges. Now, here's something I want us to remember. Do you remember where this came up before? It wasn't just long ago. It was where and I'm going to say in Luke, but it was just a couple chapters ago where who was the greatest? You remember that? Who was the greatest? Luke chapter 9 actually says, "Then a dispute among them arose, and which one would be the greatest?" So all the disciples sitting there, hey, which one's going to sit on his right and his left hand? See, they had that same thing. And then Peter, was one, but Jesus was gracious to their mother, and to them. He says, you don't know the cup. You don't know what you're asking for. So what he basically says to her, he says, are you able to drink of the cup that I am about to drink, or be baptized with the baptism that I'm about to be baptized with? The very next thing that's said is that the sons, they both jump in. Yeah, we are. We can do that. See, yeah, we can sit on the right hand and on the left hand. See, even though he's telling them, they're worried about the greatness. Now, does that not tell you about them? Does that not say something of what the mindset was going on there? When I said, why were they fearful? They were like they were going to conquer. They thought Jesus was fixing to go set up his kingdom right there. And he told them, though, I'm going to build my church on what Peter was saying, that he is the Christ. Right? That's what they said earlier. He said to them, but obviously that part had already slipped away. And now they're back to who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom, right? And so, they jumped in and they said, so Jesus says, indeed you will drink of my cup, right? And be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with. But to sit on my right hand and on my left hand is not mine to give. So one of the things that we're seeing, he says indeed. That's James was one of the very first disciples. He was beheaded by King Agrippa. And that was the very first thing. Now, if you look at John later on, John actually was exiled to the island of Patmos. But it was also in many of the things, when you look at, some of the things that happened, they said that they tried to boil him alive. And he couldn't die. He couldn't be killed. He had a supernatural protection or something, but they couldn't boil him alive. They tried to. And there was plenty. So they said, I guess they couldn't shut him up either, so they just sent him off to an island to be by himself. And that's persecution in itself, to be sent away. When they had heard this, they had jumped. When they had heard, and here's what I was saying before I went preaching. It says, when they had heard what Jesus had asked their mothers, they jumped into the conversation. And like I said, they had likely put her up to asking it to start with. And they said, indeed. And, this just shows how little they understood, what was happening. It shows that they honestly didn't believe his suffering, right? And his death would be as it was, right? Then Jesus says, but to sit on my right and on my left is not mine to give, but it is for those who it is prepared for by my Father. I want you to miss out on this, okay? Jesus isn't saying that to sit on my right hand and on my left hand you can't do, John and James. He ain't saying to any of them that they're not going to be able to. He's saying it's not mine to give, it's the Father's, right? And I want you to understand the meaning of this. The meaning is important right here. It says, or anybody else. You might be able to sit on his right hand or left hand one day. It's, when I say that, see, heaven's free for the asking, right? All you got to do is believe in Jesus and you're saved. You're there in the kingdom. It's right there. But you think about it, what have we been learning about just recently? Our rewards and our positions. Now, how is that? How do we get rewards and positions? How does that come about? Many things say, our position is determined by what we do. Those who do the will of my Father, right? But those positions, our reward does not, our positions are the things that we get our crowns for, right? Now, I'm going to go with Ephesians 2:10. It says, for we are a workmanship, right? We are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which were prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. It also, what did Jesus say about laying up treasures? Matthew chapter 6 says, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. How do you do those? For those good works that God has good works for you to do. There's things, whether you decide to do them or not, is on you. He's set them there. He says, I want you to walk through them. I think everybody has a good work that they could do, but that's not the reason why they're saved. That's the evidence of their salvation. Okay? And so, but we sit there and it says, but lay up, Matthew chapter 6, verse 20 and 21 says, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroy, nor where thieves do not break in and steal. See, it can't be taken away from you either, your rewards. For where, this is a key verse here, for where your treasure is, that's where your heart will be also. So what I want you to think about right here is, are you going to sit next to Jesus one of these days? Is that how far you're going to take what He's given you? That the Father's going to prepare that place for you because you've done those things? Not about your salvation, but about what you're doing. Or are you going to, the question I wanted to present is, what kind of place are you preparing for yourself? Do you see what I'm saying? What kind of place has the Father already had that place prepared for? Because what are you doing? Are you doing His will? Are you going out there and doing things to prove who you are, to who your salvation? Or are you not? Are you worried about other things where moth and rust do destroy? I like doing things like Jeeping and stuff like that. I got an old Jeep that I'm working on, and it rust and moss has destroyed it pretty good. Okay, it's pretty destroyed. And so, but that's not where my treasure is. Even though I like those things, right here, God's Word is where my true treasure is. That's where my treasure is. That's what I want to lay up for heaven. It's not about whether I'm sitting beside Him, but I want to have a part up there. I want my things up there. That's what the rich man, we learned about the rich man. Where is he? See, he'd had 10 times. Or as we learned not too long ago, again, it's the same message that we learned, just recently, where you had the people out in the vineyard, and how they looked at it, where their heart was, So he sat there and he said, verses 24 through 25, it says, and when the 10 heard it, listen, they were greatly displeased with the two brothers. Do you know why they were greatly displeased with the two brothers? Because they wanted their own left and right side also. See, they were at the same thing. It wasn't that they were saying, oh, you shouldn't even think like that. It's like, why did you go? And he brought all of them to him, and he called them all to himself. All of his disciples. He said, you know that the rulers and the Gentiles lord over them, those who are great exercise authority over them. I got to thinking of some of the different things that we see in this world today. What are some examples? Corporate leadership. How many times have you ever worked in a place, where the people up higher, they kind of lord it over you? They're like, well, you don't make those decisions and this and that. They actually like that authority. They like to give and show that authority that they have. That's sort of a top-down. That could be a sort of a way of thinking. How about political leadership? Many people in politics, instead of doing what their constituents want them to do, the idea, to serve them, they want to do their own. They want to show that authority and control over the people, right? They like that authority. Oh, I got authority over you. People out even in our police force sometimes like to do that authority. It's all over. Another one is authoritarian regimes, right? You see that all throughout the countries in the world where, the governments sit there and they stifle people, And so our Lord right here is sitting here and saying that, the Gentiles, they like to lord it over people. So what are you going to do? Basically, what are you going to do if I put you on my right hand and on my left hand? How are you going to act? How are you going to be? Here's what Jesus says. He says, yet it should not be so among you. But whoever desires to be great among you let him be your servant. Think about that right there. When I first started reading this, I started to think, because, when it goes on, it says that yet Jesus even came. The world and the life that Jesus desires, not only us to have now, but he's trying to train us and teach us, is that we should love one another. That whatever those desires, if I know what desires you have, that I would want to fulfill them. Me would want to fulfill them to you. And you would want to fulfill them to me. And all around the world. I think that's what heaven's going to be a lot alike. It's not going to be this, hey, look what I got my mansion. No, it's look at what brother such and such gave me in my mansion. Which this is just material things. It's not all about material things. But Jesus did give us, he gives you the air you breathe. He gives you your family. Every time you have something great happens for you, Jesus gave it to you. God give that to you. Whether you are, he says he reigns over the just and unjust. Whether you love him or not, he still give it to you while you're on this world. Right? He still give it to you. He sits there and he says that. Well, another thing that I was thinking when I was thinking about that lording over, and then he brought those two brothers with him. And we read about this a while back because it said he went to Jerusalem. Have you remember John and James, they were called the sons of thunder? The sons of thunder, how they were called that. It says in Mark chapter 3, 16 and 17, it says that Jesus actually gave them that nickname. It says Simon, whom he gave the name Peter, right? James, the son of Zebedee, and John, the brother of James, to whom he gave the name Boanerges. That is, sons of thunder. Do you know why he gave them that name? It says right here, I believe right here, and many people say this is why it came to get that name. It says, if you look in Luke chapter 9, verses 51 through 56, it says, now it came to pass when the time had come for him to be received up. That means he was walking towards Jerusalem, right? That he steadfast set his face to go to Jerusalem. And that's what we see here. Jesus is heading straight to Jerusalem. They were in amazement, but they're in fear of that. And he sent messengers before his face. And as they went, they entered into a village of the Samaritans to prepare for him. But they did not receive him because his face was set to go to Jerusalem. Right? And when the disciples, James and John, saw this, they said, They said, Lord, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them just as Elijah did? See, think about the mindset of what they're in. They thought, okay, we're going to go to Jerusalem and we're going to set you up as king. Hey, we'll be able to call down fire from heaven. Just consume them, consume the people. That was maybe how they thought they were going to have this battle, to put Christ in that position of being king. You see what I'm saying? And it says that Jesus then, he says, but he turned and rebuked them and said, you don't know what manner of spirit you are of. Now, he's not necessarily saying that spirit of consuming and that war forbidden spirit, but they don't understand the spirit that they are of, meaning who they are in Christ Jesus, right? He sits there and he then says, for the Son of Man did not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them, right? And yet then they went to another village. That nickname, that was that zeal that they had for God. They had that zeal, but it reflected their fiery personality. Sons of thunder. They were ready to go whatever it took. Let's take it on. Take on the world. Let's get them. And then when you sit there and look at this discussion, he's talking about they lord over. Are you going to be like Elijah was in that way, and sit down, and then when they come to the king, comes to, that brings the captain of 50s, and you just gone before, fire them, bring down that fire. Is that going to be? That's not what matter of who you are. You're not about that. That's not what Jesus was about right there. Jesus knew exactly. None of this caught him off surprise. None of it caught him by guard. He knew exactly what he was heading for. That asks a question. Do you as a Christian, do you understand, do you know the manner of spirit that you are of? Do you understand that? That you're of love. What he just said. Where you are to be somebody's servant. Do you understand? That's the spirit you are to be of. Right? And here's what he said. Jesus said, the rest of it, 27 and 28, he says, and whoever desires to be first among you, whoever wants to sit in this seat, right? Let him be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to serve, to be served, but to serve. I keep messing that up. He did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4, and this should sum this up a little bit. This is what Paul was talking about. He said, let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness in mind, let each esteem others better than themselves. Let each of you look out. It says, let each of you look out, not on his own interest, but on the interest of others. Is that not what I just said just a minute ago? Where my interests are going to be your interest. And I'm going to look at you as greater. You, brother, are greater than me. You, brother, and you, sister, are greater than me. You're going to look at that, not in doing that in some kind of pity way, but in doing that in a true, in your heart way. That you're wanting to desire that those people that are next to you, that you know, that even those that you don't know, that you're willing to do whatever it takes for them. Right? That you're willing to help them. That you're willing to be out there. 1 Peter says right here also, 1 Peter 5, chapter 5, verse 5 and 6 says, likewise, you younger people, submit yourselves to your elders. But then he says, yes, all of you be submissive one to another, and be clothed with humility. For, what does it say? And this goes why they didn't understand it. God resists the proud, right? But gives grace to the humble. Therefore, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time. See how that works together? If you resist, if you're proud about it, God's going to resist you, and you're not going to understand. Right? If you don't believe, hey, I know better than and in my mind, I think because I'm a young earth creation, I believe in a young earth. And many people say, yeah, but you know what? This millions of years, man, these people don't even understand that God created the time just for us. It don't matter if he makes it look like 1,000,000 years or 10 zillion years. I don't care what proof you got. He created that time for us to make it look like it did. But according to the Bible, the people are here within that amount of time, within 6,000 years. And that's just how I believe. God's the one that did it. God's the one that made it. He knows that, I had a person tell me, yeah, God knew me 17 million years ago. Whatever number he could pick out of his mind. You call it whatever you want to call it. I call it 6,000. You call it 17 million. I don't care. God created that time, and he knew about you, forehand knew about you before that He caused you to do those works through. He wants you to do those works, right? He foreknew you there that you would do those works through Him. You know? So whether it was, you want to call it 17 million or whatever, see, you don't understand though, and you're on this other part that you don't really believe. Because you don't believe what this word says, what it says. You know, and that's why you have that hard understanding, can't understand it. But with something, to me, it's so simple that God just created it. He created the earth. He's going to fold this place up again one of these days. And it's not going to be like our hymnal says, 10,000 years that we're going to be rejoicing. We're not even probably going to keep up with years. Well, nobody know, because it's going to be an eternity. There ain't going to be no more time. There ain't going to be no day or night. He put all those things in motion for the signs and seasons and things. We ain't going to have it. We're going to have Christ as our light. You know? So all of those things. Don't be proud about what you think you know when you find out it's all folly in the end. God's word is what's true. Don't stumble over it. Don't stumble over it. He will exalt you. He will put you on the left hand and on the right hand and put you there with Jesus. If you humble yourselves, if you become a servant, become a slave to your neighbor, He will do those things. Let me read you this poem I got from Chuck Swindoll's, that book, The Tardy Ox Cart. But it actually comes from a poem that's another book he got it from. Is from Emma A. Lent. It's quoted in Hazel Feeman's Poems That Live Forever, right? It's called Unawares. And just listen to this poem. It says, "They said the master is coming to honor the town today, and none can tell what house or home the master will choose to stay. And I thought, while my heart beat wildly, what if he should come to mine? How would I strive to entertain and to honor the guest divine? And straight I turned to toil to make my home more neat. I swept and polished and garnished and decked it with blossom sweet. I was troubled for fear the master might come ere my work was done. And I hasted the worked the faster, and watched the hurrying sun. But right in the middle of the duties, a woman came to my door. She said she had come to tell her of her sorrows, and my comfort and my aid to implore. Nor help you in, he says, she said, I cannot, and I said, I cannot listen nor help you any today. I have greater things to attend to. And the pleader turned away. At last the day had ended, and my toil was over and done. My house was swept and garnished, and I watched in dark alone. I watched, but no footfall sounded. No one paused at my gate. No one entered my cottage door. I could only pray and wait. I waited till night had deepened, and the master did not come. He entered some other door, I said, and gladdened some other home. My labor had been for nothing, and I bowed my head and wept. My heart was sore with longing, yet in spite of all it I slept. Then the master stood before me, and his face was grave and fair. 3 times today I came to your door, and I craved your pity and care. 3 times you sent me onward, unhelped and uncomforted, and the blessing you might have had was lost. Your chance to serve was fled. Oh, Lord, dear Lord, forgive me. How could I have known it was thee? My very soul was shamed and bowed in death of humility. And he said, the sin is pardoned, but the blessing is lost to thee. For comforting not the least of mine, you have failed to comfort me. So that's a good poem right there, and that should make us think. That's exactly what we're talking about right here. If you want to be the greatest, you need to be a servant. Just like Christ served. That's the paradox. People think that they got to do this and do that. And it kind of seems opposite, that I need to become your servant in order to be your leader. In order to be like over you or whatever it is, that's how it is. And if you want to move in those positions into this world, if you want to be closer and have your rewards, become a servant like Christ did. Everything we do, whether it be, share something, you're serving other people. You're doing it out of love for others. Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we just come to you today and we just love you and we just praise you so much. Lord, let this word go out. Let it go into our hearts and into our minds. Lord, don't let the devil come and take it away from us. And just like we heard earlier. Lord, but let it dwell within us richly and help us to do those things that we need to do, Lord, to be closer to you, that we may set up our treasures in heaven, Lord, one of these days by our servant to you. Not only to you, but to our fellow brothers and sisters. So we can be a neighbor, a friend to those. Lord, don't let us be so overwhelmed with this world that the riches and the glories of this world at this present time choke out, like your word says. Don't let us to be like that, but let us to be strong and finish this race. Finish this for our rewards. As Paul said, let's finish strong. Lord, we love you and we praise you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.